Hello everyone, my name is Raina D. Jute and welcome to my concepts video for Module 13. When I was building the rocket delivery mobile app, I picked up three things that made me really stop and think. So not just syntax I looked up, but moments where my understanding kind of shifted. So I'm going to walk through each one, explain what it is, why it tripped me up, and how it's used in this project. So without further ado, let's jump into concept number one, which is vacuous truth. And to go over this, let's take a look at restaurant menu screen.js. So this concept is the most interesting to me. So on the restaurant menu, the create order button needs to be disabled until I add at least one item. So I check whether every quantity is 0. With this object values quantities every quantity equals 0. And here's the thing that kind of tripped me up about this. So when the page first loads, quantities is an empty object. So I'm calling every on an empty array. My intuition said that that should return false, like nothing matches yet, so the answer is no, but it actually returns true. This is a concept called vacuous truth. So the way that this .every works is it asks, is there any element that breaks this condition? And if the array is empty, there are no elements to break it, so it defaults to true. The reason this matters is it accidentally does the right thing. So with no items, every quantity is all 0 by default, so the button stays disabled. But it was working correctly for a reason that I didn't understand at first, which is why I wanted to understand it and explore this concept. So once I understood why, we add this explicit check with this quantity's length equals 0, so the intent reads clearly and I'm not relying silently on a quirk or something that I don't understand. Concept number 2 is React versus React Native. Our second concept is the difference between React Web and React Native. I've worked with React before on the web, so I went in assuming that I could use HTML, so div classes, paragraph tags, button tags, but none of these exist in React Native. The mental model that clicked for me is that React and React Native share the exact same component system, so they've got the same hooks, the same state, and the same kind of way of thinking, but what changes is what it renders to. So React on the web renders to the browser's DOM. React Native renders to the actual native iOS and Android UI elements. So instead of a div class, I use a view tag. Instead of p, it's text. And instead of input, it's text input. And clicks become on press instead of on click. And styling is a little bit different too. So there's no CSS or class names. I use a JavaScript style sheet with camel case properties and no cascading. One specific choice that came out of this was I used pressable everywhere instead of basic button. Because the reason pressable works better is it allows me to apply my own styles and react to the pressed state, so my buttons actually match my design instead of looking like default native buttons. First time that this actually started making sense to me was when I pulled up the iOS simulator, because I was trying to scroll using my mouse and I was trying to figure out why it wasn't working the right way. And it's because by design, React Native is supposed to respond to how a person uses a phone. So they press and then they scroll. And so in order to scroll on the iPhone emulator, I had to click and hold on my mouse and then, move the mouse up and down to scroll. And I was like, oh, this makes sense because it's not responding to a mouse click, it's responding to a person's finger pressing and scrolling. So that's when the pieces kind of started to come together for me on this one. And we see that in loginscreen.js. We have these text tags where there is text, and then we have pressable for whatever button we have. In this case, it's the login button. And then this keyboard avoiding view. This is something that I implemented so that when the keyboard pops up to type in your credentials, your login, your password, etc., it doesn't cover the button that you're supposed to press to submit. So it's just a different way of thinking about how to design things, which was actually kind of fun. And the third concept is using useRef to hold a timer. So in my order confirmation modal, after an order succeeds, I show a check mark and then auto dismiss the modal after 5 seconds with a set timeout, which we can see right here, lines 32 through 38. So if an order status is successful, then we use this set timeout to dismiss on 5 seconds or 5,000 milliseconds. But we need to hang on to the timer's ID. because if the user closes the modal early by clicking outside of it, I have to cancel the timer, otherwise it tries to update a component that's already gone, which will throw a warning. My first instinct was to store a timer ID in useState because state is the tool I reach for when I need to remember a value, but in this case that's the wrong tool. And understanding why is the concept here. Every time you set state, React re-renders, so storing a timer ID in state would trigger a pointless re-render every time I start or clear the timer. useRef is the right answer because it gives me a .current value that persists across renders but doesn't cause a re-render when I change it. So the rule I took away is if a value needs to survive renders but doesn't affect what's on screen, like a timer ID, it belongs in a ref and not in a state. And then I pair it with the useEffect cleanup function, which cancels the timer if the modal unmounts first. So that is my understanding of the three concepts: vacuous truth, how a .every handles the empty array, the real difference between React and React Native, and why a timer belongs in a ref instead of a state. All three were moments where I had to actually understand why something behaved the way it did, not just how to make it work. So that's all I've got for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.